Okay, so because of some of the themes I'm going to cover in this video today, I wore red. Red is the color of passion and love, intensity. This is all very relevant to the themes of this video. I also, red is also like a political color, and the hair, if you notice, I'm very coiffed today. So this is also me at my most political. That is also relevant to this video. I know, I ran a poll a few months back on my YouTube channel, and you guys basically voted on the videos that you don't care to watch, and one of them was political videos, like political opinion or really just current events in general, that are not related to like gay themes. But I promise you, this applies to gay themes, what I'm going to talk about, that I really want to talk about and get off my chest today. Because it comes up in gay relationships, and it's come up in some situations that I've been involved in previously. Let's start off with just the Clip Notes version, because I don't want to dive too much into the minutia of stuff that you guys wouldn't care to think about or to listen to. So, very esoteric reference. Aubrey O'Day. Does anybody here know who Aubrey O'Day is? Clip Notes version. Aubrey O'Day is a reality TV star / former pop star, we can say, of a girl group with minor chart success. This isn't, we're not talking about the Spice Girls here, okay? But she was signed to a huge producer and record label, Diddy, for those of you who know pop culture and stuff. She was in the group Danity Kane. I want to say, was it like 2007-ish, 2005-ish? So what, like almost 20 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago? Anyway, very random reference, but Aubrey O'Day, I saw this video recommended to me on YouTube the other day. Like, it came up on the recommended tab, and it was a podcast interview with her. So I just clicked out of curiosity, and the comments were savage. So I was like, I have to listen into this. I'm not asking you to be invested in Aubrey O'Day. You don't have to Google her if you're not curious, if you don't know who she is. But I find this woman fascinating, and I had no idea that she's so. I remember seeing her on Making the Band on the TV show back when I was, I think, in high school. I didn't know that she's so well spoken, and she's very intelligent and very analytical. But like many people who are very intelligent, there's also this side to her where it's like she goes down the rabbit hole, and it quickly turns into delusion, I would say. And she just keeps going and going and going, and at a certain point you're like, all right, like, let somebody else talk. There's a narcissism to her a bit. And they say that at the root of narcissism is deep insecurity. And I definitely picked up on that from listening to listening to that podcast. But then I was fascinated, and I went down the rabbit hole. And turns out Aubrey O'Day had an affair with Donald Trump's son, Don Jr., who's probably the most sort of charismatic, he's not even that charismatic, but the most, I guess we can say, interesting of the Trump children in terms of his antics that are quite comparable to his father's antics, no matter what you think politically. So anyway, it's just interesting that it's a family thing, it's a family affair, I guess, that, just like Trump had the whole Stormy Daniels thing, the son had this with Aubrey O'Day, and similarly it was kind of covered up during the election, I guess during the presidency as well. But it's just so random that world of reality TV and like pop music from 15, 20 years ago would merge with our world of politics, which kind of shows you where we are today, right? As a nation and as a culture. Anyway, so I was fascinated that like she somehow was a part of that world at one point. And today, at the time of this video, I ended up watching her on another podcast with Michael Cohen, the famed, the notorious now disgraced lawyer, I guess we can say, from the Trump administration. Listening to her talk about this affair was so interesting to me, because in the conversation, she points to generational sort of trauma and themes within the Trump family that are toxic. And I'm not saying that to put down the Trump family. I'm saying it to indicate that we all, like, in listening to this, I was thinking about my own family. I was thinking about the world that we live in, that we all carry these themes in our families, right, of generational trauma, which sounds, at first it sounds very like, ooh, neo spiritual guru talk of like the chains of your ancestors kind of thing. But if you think about it, it makes sense, because we learn so much from parenting, from our family dynamics, from our culture, and it stays with us, and we normalize things. Everybody normalizes things that are not necessarily normal. So in listening to her talk about these themes within the Trump family that she observed, and having listened to her now on a few podcast episodes, I was fascinated by her ability to assess somebody else's sort of trauma and themes, but kind of lacking the awareness that she's doing the same thing as a woman who had an affair with a married man and hasn't gotten to the finish line of realizing, like, how did I attract this? Why did I attract this? And how do I heal from this? And she was kind of living in that wound of like, he really loved me and all this stuff. And it got me thinking about how there's this therapist that I watch occasionally on YouTube, Dr. Ramani. I can't watch her consistently because narcissism is the main thing she talks about. And it like messes with me to think about it too much, because I get kind of, I guess, anxious, and it makes me think about people I've met, people in my life, and I get like a little paranoid, and I'm like, oh my God, it's depressing that like you constantly have to assess people's integrity around you and stuff like that. But something that she had said in one of her videos on YouTube that stuck with me was that we are attracted to people who are narcissistic, because narcissistic people are intelligent, they are charismatic, they talk a big game, like it's charming. People who have narcissistic tendencies, and it's something that as a culture we've been taught to be attracted to. So just listening to Aubrey talk about her attraction to Don Jr., Donald Trump's son, I was thinking, like, we've all been there. We've all been attracted to somebody that we're not supposed to be attracted to, but the allure gets us. And I think Trump, the father, the former president, is a great example of this. Like, no matter what you think about him politically, a lot of people were attracted to his personality and his sort of like, I say what I say no matter what attitude. People loved that boldness because it's very much the antithesis of what you're used to in politics. Listening to her speak, I was thinking about, like, how does this relate to me? How does, like, in my own personal life, how does this resonate, and how does this remind me of also just gay relationships, gay dynamics? And it got me thinking about how when I was 21, and I mentioned this on this channel, that I had this connection with a 45-year-old man, and it's something that today I don't think would happen. Like, if I met him today, or if I met somebody with the same sort of personality, I guess I maybe had certain vulnerabilities at that time, or desires or insecurities that he kind of like fit the mold of what I would be attracted to. And I found out after the fact, like way after being involved with him, that he was partnered and that he was basically married to this guy in another state. And by that point I was already so emotionally invested that it was a shocker, and it fucked with me. But I was thinking about this as I was listening to her talk about her being in this affair. The difference is she was fully aware that the guy was married and that they had kids, so it's a whole different situation. But her thought process was really interesting to me, that she was still living in that wound of like, he really loved me, he just couldn't be with me, and he said all these things. And she was still in that obsessive mode of still analyzing, like, was it real? I think it was real. And I related to that. But the last time I had that obsession was literally when this thing happened to me in my early 20s. And I don't put any stock into it nowadays. Like, nowadays I realize, I think part of becoming an adult and maturing and growing emotionally is you realize certain things you will never get closure. And when it comes to relationships and love and deception. At a certain point, you have to realize you will never know the truth, but there's also no such thing as the truth. You felt what you felt, you had the connection you had, the person might have been disingenuous, but it's all really, it boils down to perception rather than reality. Like, you will never know what somebody else was thinking. And I've also learned that some people have limitations on how much they can feel, the range of their emotions, what love feels like to them. And so it doesn't mean that it wasn't necessarily real or authentic. It just means that for them it meant something different in their ability to feel, in their ability to love, show compassion, and so on. I think some people have limited empathy and they're born that way, they are raised that way, and it's not inherently good or bad or inherently deceptive. I think everybody has their own journey, and everybody has a possibility of learning and growing and building self-awareness. And some people just don't. Like, some people don't do the work or don't care enough to think about these things. So anyway, I just thought it was very interesting listening to her as a woman sort of fall for that trap of, clearly she attracted somebody who gave her a little bit of love without really committing to her, right? She was the other woman. It got me thinking about how so many people, especially women, get themselves into those situations and they're always wondering, like, did he really love me? Did he really love me? Instead of seeing the bigger picture, right, of why are you so obsessed with finding out whether somebody loved you? And I think it boils down to insecurity. Like, if she could see the bigger picture of she desperately needed to feel loved by somebody else to feel that she mattered, and especially by a man. And so again, I'm not saying this to judge, I'm just saying it reminded me of that guy when I was 21. But what stunned me was that now in my early 30s, I have no emotion towards that guy. Now, again, different situation. I was not in love with him. We were not like talking about getting married or anything. And she claims that this was, I guess this was, I'm assuming, years long, this affair that she had with Don Jr. And of course, it's more traumatizing when then the father becomes president of the United States. So he's everywhere on TV, like, you can't escape it. So I totally get that it's a totally different situation, but there's parallels there. And it made me sad to think she's repeating a pattern of some kind of wound that she must have had as a child or growing up, this desire to feel validated by a man. And she's obviously not the only one. I think a lot of people have that. I think men have that, can be capable of that as well, especially gay men, right? Because of our sort of traumas and complexes that we're more likely to grow up with. But at a certain point, right, you have to do the work to realize you can't depend on the validation of another human being to feel like you have an identity. And the irony too is that when you're seeking the validation of someone, you're sort of putting them on a pedestal. And she had moments during these podcasts where she was totally still putting him on a pedestal. Like, he was so smart and he had these qualities and that quality. And the thing is, people attract each other for a reason. So if you're a broken person attracting somebody who you don't feel loved by, or, it's a torrid situation, it takes two broken people to have a broken dynamic. So it's interesting to me as well that if you're seeking the validation of someone, or you have a toxic situation with somebody, a toxic relationship, both parties are broken, and he has his own trauma, right? And he has his own issues. And the way it's showing up in that dynamic is the way, I guess, he treated her, the stuff he has with his family, and she has her trauma and her wounds, and it's showing up for her in a different way. And I guess my point of this video is just, I found it fascinating to sort of see yet another example of in society how people's mental health sort of wounds come up and they're reliving a cycle. And I wish more people would wake up to this reality that I think applies to all human beings, that we're all sort of always repeating things that trigger our Achilles heel. But at a certain point, you have to become cognizant of that. You have to become aware of it. And I just think it's fascinating that she is very well spoken. Almost, I would say, even how quick she is to respond, it almost feels maybe not rehearsed, but like she's prepared and she's been saying this and she's been talking about it obsessively to everybody. So it's like, it's almost eerie how it just comes out of her like this is the millionth time she's talked about it. And at a certain point, you have to stop talking and pause and pay attention to the themes of what you're saying and what keeps showing up, instead of living in the victimhood mindset or looking for validation or looking for closure. You do have to become your own, like the hero, the protagonist of your own story at a certain point. So that's what I wish for Aubrey O'Day. That's what I wish for anybody who is stuck in that cycle of seeking external validation to feel worthy as a person. And it's definitely a journey, and I think it's a journey that everybody relates to in their own way, whether it shows up in work, whether it shows up in family, in body image. Like there's so many different ways it could show up, and I think it shows up for everybody in some way. I wish people would focus more on the healing element versus the problem, right? I think a lot of people in life are stuck in that cycle of focusing on the trauma and the problem of why did this happen? Is my assessment really correct? Which is something that I used to do way more. And now I try to focus more on how do I grow from this? How do I build from this? How do I get to the next step of my personal evolution with this? How do I come from a place of fixing and solving, problem solving, versus just being hyper-focused on the issue? For me, problem solving, right? Not just critical thinking, but then to take it to the next level of how do I evolve from this? How do I resolve this? How do I fix this? That's so attractive in a person, both as a friend and as a partner, as a leader, as a boss. It's a very attractive quality, and I feel like you reach a certain age where you realize that a lot of people don't have that ability to problem solve. I think a lot of people do have the ability, though, to keep reliving the same story over and over, the same script. And you meet people like Aubrey in life, and sometimes you just want to shake them. I feel like I've met so many women like her where it's like, okay, get to the next part now. Like, yes, you figured this out, that there's a reason why you're obsessing over it and it keeps coming up in your life. Now, how do you get to the next point? Maybe you have to shift your value system. Maybe you have to approach self-esteem differently, relationships differently, friendships differently. Anyway, sounding off, always curious what you guys think about this. Thanks for tuning in if you made it this far into the video.